much does it really cost to run a self-managed super fund? And do you get good bang for your buck? Well, Rice Warner has just released a comprehensive report on this issue, an update to a report released back in 2013. It was commissioned by the SMSF Association, whose CEO, John Maroney, joins us now. Hi, John.
Morning, Tracey. How are you?
Really well, thank you. John, the research was partly aimed at determining the minimum cost-effective balance for self-managed super funds. What's the magic number?
Well, it's a very good question, Tracey, and the broad answer is it depends, but to generalise, as long as you have at least $200,000 in a self-managed super fund, it's usually two people, then that fund can be cost competitive with larger superannuation funds. And once you have over $500,000, it can be the cheapest option available. And that's very much different to a lot of perceptions in the marketplace.
And why were those perceptions in the marketplace previously?
Well, I think most recently, and about a year ago, ASIC updated its guidance and changed what had previously been advice based on a Rice Warner report in 2013. So they had increased their guidance from 200,000 to 500,000 as a indicator, not a hard number, but an indicator that if you have less than that, then maybe a self-managed super fund may not be appropriate. Whereas we commissioned Rice Warner to update their research using more extensive data and looking at what have been cost trends over the past 7 years, just to do a real temperature check, a real assessment of what the reality was now. And we were quite pleased to see their report come through and say, no, the $200,000 figure still applied. And in fact, there were fewer conditions to make that a relevant number now than there was in 2013.
And what about opportunity costs given the time spent managing a self-managed super fund?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. And there have been surveys that have indicated it can take a lot of time. We've recently done a survey which we'll be releasing later this week, which indicates that a lot of trustees find they only need a few hours a month to cover off most of the required obligations. Some of them spend more time, or a lot more time, particularly those who are retired, interested in investment markets and are keen to read the financial papers every day and to really study things closely. But at the other end of the extreme, if people have a good accountant, a good financial advisor that helps them substantially, then it may be only a few hours a month is required. And so the opportunity cost depends a lot on how people want to actually run their fund.
Just out of interest, is there a correlation between the time taken researching, whether you do it yourself or you do it through an external body, and the returns you get on your SMSF?
We haven't seen any research that indicates so, but I think there would be in part, though one of the conclusions we're drawing is that larger SMSFs do generally have higher investment returns, and we think there's a number of reasons there. One would be a number of the smaller funds, so people in retirement that are potentially very much focused on capital preservation and have low risk appetite when it comes to taking investment risk. And also the benefit that comes from using a specialist SMSF advisor to help focus on ensuring good diversification of the portfolios, of ensuring that people can sort of manage over volatile markets like we've seen this year. And there has been a higher allocation to cash in the SMSF sector compared to the larger fund sector. Some of that is probably very logical and rational for those that are older and risk averse, but I think some of it is where people come into the sector thinking they're going to go and make a lot of investment decisions, and they find that there is some reluctance to actually make the decisions and implement. So they may be sitting on higher cash allocations than is optimal, and having an advisor can really help them work through their goals, their strategies, the options, and actually help that whole coaching side of how do you actually turn the plan into reality.
The report also points out that APRA-regulated funds enjoy a guarantee of their benefits, which members of self-managed super funds do not. Does this indicate that SMSFs are, by their very nature, riskier?
That would be one perspective, but the risk on the on the APRA side is that any of the guarantee is actually paid for by other members of APRA funds. So the guarantee is essentially from one group of APRA regulated fund members to other APRA fund members, and that transfer doesn't apply in the self-managed super fund area. There are other protections in terms of ability to go to the Financial Complaints Authority if it's eligible under their arrangements. The courts are always there, so it's not as though there isn't protection, but it is primarily up to people to wisely choose their own investments, to monitor them, and that is a differentiating feature for the SMSF sector, and one that people should be quite upfront about in realising that yes, when they decide to purchase a particular investment, if that goes bad, then they are responsible for that. Similarly, if they get very high returns from astute investment picking, they benefit fully from the gains rather than sharing that in a pooled arrangement.
John Maroney, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure, Tracey. I hope that's helpful for your listeners.